Good evening, everybody. It has been so long and I miss talking to you guys. Tonight on April Showers, we are going to discuss the power of healthy communication in all relationships. What does it mean to have healthy communication in all relationships? So tonight I'm going to have my sister is going to join me and have this conversation with me. And she's going to kind of give her ideology on her views on healthy communication, her tips on communicating properly with people, the dangers of miscommunicating. And we want to talk about what is God's perspective on having a healthy conversation with all people. And when I say healthy conversation, I mean being able to talk to people without yelling, cursing, without losing them as family, as a friend, as a loved one, a companion, husband, wife. So let's dig in. I am about to introduce my sister, Nakia Whetstone. Hi, Kaya. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes. So I've introduced you to everyone.
Hello.
So I've already kind of went over our topic tonight, the power of communicating in all relationships, and our outline on kind of what we're going to discuss when it comes down to that. So I would kind of like to let you start off, and let's go ahead and discuss what is the power of communicating in relationships.
Right, yes, ma'am. So the power of communicating in relationships to me is basically being able to, for both parties in a relationship, to express their current feelings and what they're thinking, and to be able to do that in a safe environment and to be able to do it thoroughly as they can while respecting the other person as well.
Right, right. And I agree with that. Being able to have a conversation with someone where they're feeling that it's a safe atmosphere, they're not feeling threatened, they're not feeling misled, belittled, or
Mm.
intimidated by the other person. Absolutely.
Right.
So let's get into what are some of the dangers when communicating? What are some of the things that we've seen, experienced, or may have led as a person when you're talking to someone? What are some dangerous things that we've seen take place when you're talking to? It could be your mom, your sister, your significant other, your teacher.
Mhm. So for me, some examples I've seen surround basically misinterpretation. So basically when you can't communicate yourself clear enough, sometimes the other party can really misinterpret what you're saying and take it the wrong way. And so sometimes it could lead to them feeling hurt, getting angry, which could lead to a whole lot of other things. And then you now have to fight a little bit harder to basically be heard or to understand the other person. So it's like it's harder on both sides, when you can't get that clear communication out. Like sometimes maybe you're talking about something, right? And you say it the wrong way and they're like, "Oh, now you're talking about this and that," and it leads to different situations and you don't get that clear communication out anymore. And now it's an argument rather than just a conversation about what you two are going through.
Right. And so basically you're saying not taking out the time to listen.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you're talking to people and sometimes people talk at you versus is being quiet to listen to what you're saying.
Right. They listen to respond.
Yeah, and you know what? I just read a scripture and I want to share it right now because it's so equal to what you just said. And it is Proverbs chapter 18 verse 13. And this is the NLT version. And it says, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah. And that is
Mhm.
Proverbs 18:13. So, like you just said, sometimes we will sit there and not process or hear what someone is saying, but will quickly just say, well,
Mhm.
is this, or is that, or I ain't trying to hear all that, you know? And so that's the
Exactly.
dangers of communicating, because I want to share when we communicate with people dangerously, first of all, is disrespectful. And
Yep.
so you're sending the message to that person that I don't want to hear what you have to say, and I could care less about what you're saying,
Mhm.
because what you're saying doesn't mean anything to me, because it's all about what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I'm learning to, this is a personal topic for me.
Mhm.
I'm learning that sometimes you have to take a step back
Mhm.
and see, not only hear, but see in your mind,
Mhm.
your mental, like a mental art, where is
Yep.
this person coming from? Or where have they been to see it this way?
Right, right. I definitely agree. I feel like as human beings, we're very quick to defend ourselves. So we don't really think, oh, maybe I actually did really hurt this person. Maybe I should hear them out so I don't make this mistake again. They think, oh, you just took it that way. I didn't mean it that way. So why are you acting like this? So they're quick to defend themselves rather than listen to the other party and be like, okay, I see what you're saying. Next time I'll make sure that I don't word it this way.
Right, right. Be quick to apologize, because even though you may have not meant something a certain type of way, if someone
Mhm.
thought it was that way, there's no reason why you can't go back and say, hi, I did mean it like this, and I apologize that I said it like that.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
that also helps to calm down those, like, because sometimes communication could turn to arguments. And when you acknowledge that maybe you missaid something, it helps to calm down that argument and help you to get back on track to that conversation and getting to the root of what y'all are talking about so that you can, get it resolved.
Yeah, yeah, and you will have healthier relationships. When
Mm-hmm.
you know how to speak with someone, and you know how to get your point across without it being discouraging, yelling, like you said, or, because sometimes things can escalate into physical altercations as well,
Right
because communication was not done properly.
there. Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so that kind of goes into too the tips of communicating properly. You know,
Mhm.
just making sure, like you said, the environment is controlled, where
Mhm.
sometimes people tend to communicate dangerously when they have an audience.
I was just about to say that. Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes they'll try to, be boastful because you have an audience. You'll try to get real loud, or you'll try to um,
Mhm.
get disrespectful with the other person, but still remembering this person is important to you. And if
Right.
someone is important to you, you're going to watch the way you speak to them, and you're going to make sure that they're understanding where you're coming from.
Right. And for me, I feel like a good tip with that is, so sometimes you might get into a little argument in public, but the important thing is to not let it turn into an argument in public. Like sometimes you can sit there and you might have a problem. You can be like, hey, I'm feeling this way in this moment. Maybe we should hold off till we get home, or maybe we should step aside and speak quietly to each other so that we can be heard and we can both understand what's happening so we can go back on to enjoying our day, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you have to be willing to be like, okay, hold on, like hold off, basically. Put those emotions kind of on hold for a second till both of you are alone and you can properly communicate and easily hear each other versus screaming at each other in public to be heard. Because then neither one of you are going to be heard because you're worried about what people are going to think. There's people around you that's listening to you argue. Let's say you're around family. Now you have family inputting, which makes it harder for your partner to communicate because now
Right.
they have your parent jumping on them and they don't feel like it's a safe space for them to no longer communicate.
Right. And then you have embarrassment that seems to
Yep.
happen. Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, another thing too is what I've learned over the years is, this is a big one for me. I've learned over the years is, when you're communicating with someone, ask yourself, is what I'm going to say next going to change things? Is it going to make
Hmm.
it better? Is it going to make it worse? Is this person even going to care to change?
Right. Hmm.
And so after you silently ask yourself those questions in your mind, and if the
Mhm.
answer is no, it ain't gonna make a difference. They ain't gonna change. Nothing I'm saying gonna change how they feel.
Yep.
Then your conversation should go smoother,
Yeah.
I think,
Definitely.
because then you already know there's nothing you can say that's gonna change how the person feels.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can say that's going to change their mind, they're
Mhm.
going to believe. So then your approach could be then, an apology. I apologize that you feel this way, but you do not have to have this whole long argument.
Right.
You don't have to have this convincing session where you're trying to make somebody think like you.
Mhm.
Then you got to take a step back, cool down, chill, and just be like, hey, this is this is that. And I see where this is going, and it's going to be ABZ. And
Yep.
you know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Mhm. I definitely agree. I feel like that's very important too for beginner relationships, like people that are just getting into relationships, communicating what you expect in the relationship so that you don't
Mhm.
have problems later down the line. Because I notice a lot of people get in relationships and they don't communicate what they want throughout their life or how they expect things. So then when the time comes, they get in arguments, like full blown arguments over it because they never had that communication phase where they discussed, hey, I don't like it when someone does this. Hey, I don't like it when if I'm upset, you might do this and this.
Right.
So it destroys that relationship before it even begins because you never had that communication process of,
Mhm.
what triggers you and things like that.
Exactly. Exactly. Knowing each other's triggers is very important because if you know each other's triggers, you can prevent a lot of things.
Right. Hmm. I
I
definitely.
yes, because that's another thing too. Um, through communication, you should already know each other's triggers,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I want to steer this to the man, your man is your protector.
Hmm.
And so through communication, if he knows what triggers you and he's your protector, it's an automatic response to protect what he sees is going to trigger you or what he
Right.
knows is coming towards you to trigger you. So that may
Right.
be outside women, that may
Hmm.
be jealous people who come to attack you. He's going to automatically respond as your protector to come to serve and protect.
Right. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And that's very important for relationships is knowing those triggers and things like that. And because it could be the smallest thing, but it still is a trigger for you. And it's important that your partner knows, like, hey, I don't like this, because every trigger is different in every relationship. Not everybody's the same. So they don't think this, like, you might think this is weird, but they're like, oh, this isn't weird. I mean, this is how I normally do things. So it's important for you to know what exactly triggers them so that you can either avoid doing it around them or you can
Mhm.
tell them like, okay, let's meet somewhere in the middle or something.
I think so. And not to mention, knowing your own triggers is also
Hmm.
important. Know
Definitely.
yourself. Do not get lost into somebody else. Know you first.
Yep.
Who are you?
Hmm. And that's very important because triggers also go into boundaries. Like if doing this triggers you and he keeps or he keeps insisting, oh, let's do this, or let's do it like this, and it's going to trigger you, then it kind of comes up to you to be like, to communicate and be like, hey, this is a big trigger for me. It's not going to end well if I do this. I prefer to not. And then that's up to your partner to be like, okay, I hear you. So we're not going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That way they
I
protect your
said that
boundaries.
goes for women too, knowing what's your mate's trigger, protecting his emotional state. So he can be healthy too in the home and, wherever setting y'all are in, making
Hmm.
sure that you're trying to help because you're the helpmate. You're there to help and
Right.
serve. So making
Hmm.
sure that you're aware of what the things that you do that could possibly irritate or trigger your mate as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think also another good tip for better communication is active listening. Sometimes we like to kind of hear what we want to hear, and we kind of nitpick, what they're talking about. So we pick the main thing that we know is going to bother us and ignore the rest of it. And that's also what starts an argument. Like you might hear them say like one thing like, oh, sometimes you don't clean. I would like for you to clean more. I don't clean. You
Yeah.
don't hear that they're trying to just ask you for help. You just hear that they're trying to insult you. And so then
Mm-hmm.
that leads to an argument, and then that leads to your partner being like we said earlier, no, I don't mean it like that. That communication right there.
But see, okay. Now the old me know a lot about this, okay? Because the old me, if I'm talking to somebody and we're in a heated conversation, I get tunnel vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care what you're saying because I'm in a tunnel. And so all I hear is you just ranting and you just raving, and it don't mean nothing to me because it's blah, blah, blah. It's basically like a baby talking because I'm in a tunnel. You see what I'm saying? But I had to start thinking, I was like, dang, April, you get tunnel vision on people. And then it's like you don't see, it's all darkness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you too old for that. You're going to have to start switching that up because that right there is not healthy communicating.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I'm starting taking a step back and really hearing people out. And then I had to use the tip of reiterating to a person what they're saying to me.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
saying to them, so what I'm hearing you say is, and
Yeah,
is that what you wanted to say?
that's a good one. Yeah, that's definitely a good one right there. Because it gives that other partner the chance to be like, oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's a more healthier way to be like, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you meant? And then it gives them that opportunity. No, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. It's healthy. That's how you're supposed to communicate. That's communication.
Yes. And so, and then, reiterating to make sure they can clean up what they're really actually trying to say. And then not to mention asking them, okay, where would you like to see things go from here? So where you're not just taking control over the situation, but you're sharing control.
Right. You're giving them an opportunity as well.
Yeah. And then y'all are kind of meeting each other in the middle with things.
Yeah, that's definitely great. And I would also like to say for some people out there, I know some people in relationships, they're not really, how can I say, confrontational, I guess you would say. Like sometimes when they're in arguments, they tend to want to walk away. And sometimes the partner is like, oh, you're just walking away, you're not even listening to me. I feel like for people who do that, it would, communication wise, it would be better to look at your partner and be like, hey, I hear you, I definitely understand. Right now, I don't think I can be a positive input to this conversation. Do you mind if I walk away for a few moments, collect myself, and then we resume this conversation right after that, so I'm able to hear you more clearly?
That's very good. That's something very good to do, I would say. Another one that's really bad to do, but what you just said would be a positive to it is silent treatment. You know how sometimes someone may irritate you and upset you, and you get silent, and so they're still talking, and your response might be like, right. So they're asking, well, what's wrong with you? Nothing. When in actuality, there is something wrong with you. But instead of communicating, like you just said, right now, I can't talk about this. Can you give me a minute to kind of gather my thoughts and can we revisit?
Right.
That would be the positive.
I
Versus
definitely
staying stuck in that negative, ain't nothing wrong with me. No.
exactly, trying to do it on your own, and that's bad. Then that hurts your partner too, is you have to realize, because they want to make it better, they want to know what's happening with my partner so I can help. But when you do that, it's making your partner think, well, maybe it's something with me. Now I'm upset because they're not telling me, and I feel like they're upset with me for nothing because I have no idea what I even did. So it's good to communicate and be like, I'm just not in the mood to talk right now. Even if they did do something, be like, hey, I have something to address with you, but I don't feel like I could talk about it right now. Just give me a couple of minutes,
Right, because the silent treatment is a punishment, and a lot of us do not understand that's a punishment.
It is.
You're punishing your partner when you're giving them a silent treatment.
Exactly.
It's an unfair punishment. And then we expect them to be a mind reader.
To know, like, oh, she wants to be alone. Da, 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 da. And sometimes for some people are just kind of stubborn, they know they don't want to be alone, but they kind of want to be like, oh, I'm just going to be mean to you because I'm upset. So, but
Mhm.
they know they don't want that. They don't want that. They want their partner to be like, oh, well, let me do this and that. But you have to communicate that you want that. They're not going to know. Because some
Right.
partners they'll be like, oh, well, I'm just gonna leave you for a couple of minutes so that you can work that out. And then they're like, why are you leaving? See, you don't care. You can't expect them to read your mind and know that you want privacy, you want attention. You gotta talk.
Yeah, you gotta talk it
Mhm.
out. And then,
It's
like
just
you said, when you can't talk it out, though, you have to be responsible enough to say, "Hey, you mind just giving me a few moments to kind of gather my
that.
thoughts? Because I
Hmm.
do want to respectfully speak to you, but I just cannot right now."
Exactly. I
Mhm.
agree.
And so when you do it like that, you're acknowledging to that person, I do want to talk to you. I do care enough to cool
Hmm.
down so I can talk to you.
Right. And that means a lot because it's like, okay, you're willing to acknowledge that you can't communicate positively with me right now and you don't want to hurt me and you don't want to be misunderstood. So you're being the big enough person to be like, hey, just give me a moment. That means a lot, because that means you actually care what I have to say and you want to be able to hear it correctly.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. That's very important. All
Hmm.
right. So our next one is God's perspective on communication.
Hmm.
God's perspective. So I have a scripture here from Ephesians, the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 29. And it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up."
Hmm. Definitely agree with that.
Yes. And so, when you're dealing with relationships with people, instead of being quick to tear them down, we want to encourage. And like we just said earlier, listen, hear them
Right.
out before you're going to be able to respond. You got to first hear.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because, that's arguments cause sin. You know what I mean? When you
Mhm.
argue, you start getting angry. Now it's violent, like you said earlier. Now you're hitting each other because you feel as though, okay, if you ain't gonna listen to me, I'm gonna make you listen another way with violence.
But then it could be, you might not be physically hitting somebody, but if you're speaking to somebody
Yeah.
harshly and if
Mm-hmm.
you're saying things to belittle them, that is a hit.
Yep.
It's a verbal hit. And so your
Right.
tongue is sharp as a sword.
Mm-hmm.
Scripture tells us that our tongue is sharp as a sword. So we have
Yeah.
to always watch what we're saying to people. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that, people get on your nerves.
Yeah.
People get on your nerves, people act up. But I am learning to, like I just said a few minutes ago, where did they come from to make them think like that? You know,
Right. Mm-hmm.
what
Right.
type of life situations have affected them to think about things from that aspect?
Right. And that's also important. Sometimes like your partner, maybe they have some demons they fighting that you don't really know about from their past. And that's why communication is important too. Cause you could be like, hey, I notice sometimes that you respond this way when we talk about this. Is there anything that you're comfortable sharing with me that you might want to get off your chest that I could maybe help you with? And then it's like
Mhm.
you said earlier, knowing our own triggers is also important for us as individuals to get help with things that we know is going to interfere with our personal relationships that we need healing with. So getting a therapist, getting someone you can talk to relieve that trauma so that you can be a
Mhm.
better person in the future for your partner and for yourself.
Right. You got to be healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you're not healthy now, you got to work on becoming healthy because you cannot have a healthy relationship if you're coming from a broken place.
Right. I definitely
It's
agree
not
with.
going to coincide.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one. It's coming from James chapter 1, verse 19. And this scripture says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry."
Mm-hmm.
And so that, like we've been saying, hush and listen.
Right.
Let it process, then give your response.
Right. Right.
So let it process what the other person just said to you. And if you did not understand it, ask, could you please repeat what you're saying? Or could you please say it in another way so I might can understand you better? Because I don't want to misunderstand you where there's any type of grief or anger that's going to come from this.
Right, definitely agree. And sometimes it's hard because you be getting angry, you know, during that argument. You be like, oh, they're trying to say this about me while I'm doing this ABC, you know, da 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 da. But it's important to check your emotions sometimes. Like, yes, it is okay to feel that way, but you also have to not let that emotion get overwhelmed that you say something you regret or do something you regret. You have to sometimes take a hold of that emotion, be like, listen, you know, I'm feeling angry and I'm upset, but maybe I don't need to be angry and upset. Let me just hear them out a little bit more and see, you know, why they're feeling this way before I get super upset or something like that.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm going to read this last one and then I want to say this. This last one is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. It says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords,
Yeah.
but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And that goes exactly to what you just said. We can say something and cut somebody in half. Or we can say something to someone and we can bloom them like a rose.
Yep.
Get to choose what we're going to do today. You know?
Yep.
And I think a lot of us don't take out the time to realize I can either build them or break them.
Exactly. Because you never know what your partner's going through. Like, what if you said something that could have been like that last straw for them? You know, because your partner is a human being. Depression, mental health, that's all real. You could say something that could potentially push your partner over the edge and they end up doing something. You never know. So you have to be careful with what you say, you know, because you never know if that person, that's their last hit, their final hit, you know?
Oh, yeah. And it could very well be. And then we never know, like you just said, their mental state. But that goes to, they don't never know your mental state.
Exactly.
And so you got to communicate better, you know, new relationships, old relationships. We are growing daily, yearly, monthly. And so just because you may have been with someone for 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, if we are properly growing like we are supposed to, because we are supposed to always evolve into new creatures. We should always be hungry for new knowledge, new information, and becoming better, right? And so if we're properly growing, the repeat of communication with someone that you're with, or even a business partner, a coworker, a pastor, you know, that communication should be often renewed. Because we are turning into new people. So what is new, Nakia? You know, what are your goals this year? What are you doing? Is there anything you would like to discuss? Because you're changing. So the information you gave me last year is no longer valid this year.
Right. You know? Yes, ma'am. I definitely agree with that. Everybody's always changing. And even like we talk about those triggers are always changing, you know? So you always have to keep discussing. Just because you know something now doesn't mean it's going to be the same a year later. You have to keep discussing things so that you stay on target and you're able to communicate.
Right. Right. And then through communication, you're able to find your equal, you know, because if you never communicate, you never know if the person you're with is for you.
Right.
Because that you have to find your equal. You have to find your equal because, and when I say your equal, I know we are all the same. We are all God's children. No one is better than the next. However, our minds are different. And so we have to be fully yoked with whom God has for us.
Right. Agreed. Even in the smallest things, like maybe y'all don't like the same movies, same music, you know? You can't really get along with someone that doesn't really like the same things that you do. Like you can, but it's harder, you know? Because then you can't do the same things together. You know, oh, I want to go on a date to a basketball game. I don't like basketball. How are you going to date that person, right?
Right.
So even like with small things.
Yeah, and that's a big one. For my big one is you got to be able to communicate properly with me. Like I've told you, just like if you can't talk to me, like what can we possibly talk? If it's silent, what can we talk about? That
like,
means we don't have much in common. Then I start to think, and so then I'm like, okay, I can't do that with this, you know.
Right. And that's how you know that relationship's not for you, because y'all aren't talking. When you meet your person, it's gonna be nonstop talking. You know, like you're not gonna be sitting there quiet, being like, "How are you?
Yeah.
Good. How are you? Good." Like
it's right, not the conversation flows like water when you are in the right place. The conversation flows like water.
Exactly.
It's like that conversation that you look up and 2 hours have went by and you
Exactly.
so.
You're like, oh, time didn't fly by.
Mm-hmm.
That's how
Mm-hmm.
you know. That's why that communication is important. You want to get somebody that you notice on, like you said, on your level in that way.
I agree. I agree. Is there anything else you would like to say?
I also would like to talk about relationships when it comes to family. I feel like with children especially, you when it comes to communication, you learn what you see in your home. You know what I mean? And that could also stem with, bad communication. You saw your mom yelling at your dad or your dad yelling at your mom. So therefore you grew up thinking that's the way you communicate because that's how you saw it in your household. You know
Right.
what I So I think it's
Mhm.
very important for people who have families and when their children see it to do good communication in front of their children to show them, hey, when you grow up and you get a partner, or even in just a workplace, like you said, teacher, doctor, no matter who it is, this is how you communicate to have yourself be heard and to hear the other person.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important because, yeah, we tend to mimic what we have been taught. However,
Mm-hmm.
we got to renew that.
Right.
I'm going to still say that, making sure that we are renewing our minds because I think R.C. Blakes he's a pastor on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I think he stated we have to sometimes reparent ourselves. We have to
Right.
re-raise ourselves. So you can't always kind of chalk it up. Well, I got this from my mama, or I got this from my dad.
Right.
This is what they taught me. You got to re-raise yourself because if you knew it was wrong, then
Mm-hmm.
re-raise yourself to do things right, so you will not keep this generational curse going on and on and on.
Right.
Break that curse. Go ahead and deroot that thing. Get it out of here and re-raise yourself so we can build better generations.
Right, agreed. I definitely agree with that one. Because if you can point it out, like if you're in an argument, like, sorry, I just that's just the way my mom communicate, then you know it's toxic and you know it's
Mm-hmm.
wrong. Then know that you need to drop it. So if you can acknowledge that it's not healthy, then you can acknowledge that you need to work on it and make sure that it doesn't come up in later relationships or even current ones, you know?
Yeah, and you can hear it. Like, you ever notice something that you said and you be listening to somebody you may be related to and you hear them say it to somebody and you be like, dang,
Yeah.
that sound messed up. Like, I don't want to sound like that no more, you know?
Exactly. Dang.
That has happened to me. I be like, dang, that's how that sounds. Oh, I can't do that
I,
anymore. Like, no.
I'll literally catch myself like I'm like, oh my gosh, no.
Yeah, right. I'd be like, I can't go out like that. And so if you like, but that is good catches. If you're catching yourself and you're doing something about it, that's growth. You're growing.
Exactly. You're acknowledging,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
means you as long as you can acknowledge it, you can change it.
Exactly.
Mm.
And then you got to have the mind made up to want to change it. And so you're
Right.
growing, you're evolving, you're becoming a new person. And we
Mm.
all want to become new creatures in Christ because we want to renew our minds daily.
Right. Definitely agree.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, ma'am. I think that was about it that I touched on.
I think this was a very good session on the power of communicating in all relationships. And just to wrap it up a little, we want to make sure that we are communicating properly when it comes down to our parents, treating people like we want to be treated, our mates,
Right. Mm-hmm.
our leaders, people in our community, making sure that we are being kind, whenever we can, making sure that we are showing respect in all, atmospheres, all scenes, but most definitely making sure that we're showing a Christ-like attitude because if we want to be of Christ, we have to exhibit in our outer being. So you need to be able to walk that walk and talk that talk. Not saying that we're perfect, but we got to definitely renew ourselves daily
Keep
and
working.
try. We got to try. We got to try our best. And like you
Yeah.
said, kids are watching. So, I mean, what you're doing, they're going to inevitably end up doing.
Yep. Agreed.
So I thank you so much, Nikia, for doing this with me. I appreciate you.
Of course. Of course. Anytime.
All right. Well, that is all tonight on April showers, and we will see you next time. Good night.
Bye bye.